Hurry, they're right behind us.
Rearranging. We have to find another way out.
Just keep running, don't stop.
4 women in designer blue gowns had fled from Lucian Vale's mansion in terror and disbelief, unable to face the violent reality of loving a man with blood on his hands. The rumors followed the Mafia boss everywhere, turning affection into fear, intimacy into calculation. But Amara Vane, a poor black maid working to survive, refused to run. She saw past his power, challenged his cruelty, and dared him to stop ignoring the lives he destroyed. In a world built on wealth and violence, she chose conscience. Welcome to Afro-Korean Dynasty Stories, fam. Please like, share, and subscribe. Amara Vane stood in the grand foyer of Vale Manor the morning after the exodus, her hands steady as she polished the marble banister that no one would touch. The silence felt like accusation. The 4 women who'd lived here, draped in expensive fabric and expensive lies, had vanished overnight, leaving behind perfume and panic. Varel Knox had been first out the door, her jewelry box clutched tight. Cressida and Lisette followed in tears, their heels echoing like gunshots. Seraphine had called her attorney before her engine even started. They had all known what he was. The tailored suits couldn't hide the tattoo creeping up his neck. The charm couldn't erase the whispers, the disappeared witnesses, the families ruined, the empire built on fear. When the truth finally surfaced, when federal investigators started asking questions and bodies were mentioned by name, survival instinct took over. They ran. But Amara stayed. She stood there in her pressed gray uniform with the white apron, her dark hair pulled back in its usual neat bun, hands clasped, waiting. When Lucian Vale descended the staircase, alone now, his light gray suit immaculate despite the chaos, he stopped. His mansion had never felt so empty. The silence pressed against his chest. He stared at her, this woman who cleaned his floors and served his guests and existed in the margins of his vision. "Why are you still here?" His voice carried the edge of a man who controlled everything, except this. Amara met his gaze with calm, unflinching eyes. Her voice was quiet, but it filled the space between them. "Because I have something to ask you, Mr. Vale." He almost laughed. Everyone wanted something: money, protection, escape. His eyes narrowed. "Let me guess, severance pay? A reference? Maybe you want me to forget you were ever here?" Her answer cut through his assumptions like a blade through silk. "No. I want you to face what you've done. I want you to fix what you've broken." Lucian Vale had heard 1,000 demands in his life. Threats, pleas, negotiations, but no one had ever asked him to be accountable, and certainly not a maid in a gray uniform who had every reason to run and nothing to gain by staying. He didn't know it yet, but Amara Vane had just changed the trajectory of his entire life. Lucian stared at Amara like she'd spoken a foreign language. Fix what he'd broken? The words hung in the air between them, absurd and impossible. He'd expected her to beg for money or run like the others. He'd expected fear. Yet what he got instead was this calm woman in a maid's uniform asking him to do the one thing he'd spent his entire life avoiding: face the consequences of his choices. "You don't know what you're asking," he said, his voice low and dangerous, the tone that made grown men step back. But Amara didn't move. She stood there, hands still clasped in front of her white apron, waiting. "I know exactly what I'm asking, Mr. Vale." Her voice was steady. "I've worked in this house for 2 years. I've seen the people who come through those doors. I've heard the conversations you thought I was too invisible to notice. I've cleaned the offices where you make your deals. I know what you've done." Lucian's jaw tightened. The tattoo on his neck seemed to darken. "Then you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Most people who know what I've done have the sense to disappear." "Most people have somewhere to disappear to," Amara said simply. "I don't have that luxury. I don't have savings or lawyers or family estates in other countries. I have this job. That's it." He moved closer, trying to intimidate her with his presence. It was instinct. Tower over them, make them feel small, remind them who held the power. "So, this is about job security? You think flattering me with moral speeches will keep you employed?" Amara met his eyes without flinching. No, Mr. Vale. This is about the family who lost their home because you needed to launder money through their neighborhood. This is about the woman who works 3 jobs now because her husband testified against you and ended up dead. This is about the children who go hungry because their parents can't find work after your people blacklisted them. Lucian felt something unfamiliar twist in his chest. Anger, yes, but something else too. Something that felt uncomfortably like shame. I didn't build an empire by worrying about every person who got in the way. I know, Amara said quietly. That's the problem. He turned away from her, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. The mansion felt too large suddenly, too empty. He could still smell Varel's perfume in the air, still see the marks on the marble where Cressida's suitcase had scraped. They'd all left. Every single one of them. But this maid, this woman who had every reason to fear him, stood her ground. "Why do you care?" he asked, his back still to her. "These people mean nothing to you." "They mean nothing to you," Amara corrected. "To me, they're real. They have names and faces and families, just like I do." Lucian turned back to face her. Her expression was calm but firm, like she'd made peace with whatever came next. It unnerved him more than any threat ever had. People were supposed to want things from him: money, power, protection. They weren't supposed to ask him to be better. "You're wasting your time," he said finally. "I'm not the man you think I am." "I don't think you're a good man, Mr. Vale," Amara replied. "But I think you could choose to do one good thing. That's all I'm asking. Just one." Lucian didn't agree to Amara's request. He didn't refuse it either. He simply walked away, retreating to his office where the world made sense. Numbers on screens, deals in progress. It's a power that could be measured and controlled. But 3 days later, when Amara appeared in his doorway wearing a simple coat over her uniform, he found himself curious, despite his better judgment. "We're going somewhere," she said. Not a question. Not a plea. Just a statement. "I don't take orders from my staff," Lucien replied, not looking up from his computer. "I'm not giving orders, Mr. Vale. I'm offering you a chance to see the truth." She paused. "Unless you're afraid of it." That got his attention. Lucian Vale wasn't afraid of anything. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and followed her out to his car. If nothing else, he'd prove her wrong and end this nonsense once and for all. Amara directed him to the east side of the city, where the buildings leaned like tired old men and the streets were cracked and forgotten. Lucian had driven through neighborhoods like this before, but always with tinted windows, always on his way to somewhere else. He'd never stopped, never looked closely. "Park here," Amara said. They walked 2 blocks to a small apartment building with peeling paint and broken railings. Amara knocked on a door on the 3rd floor. A woman answered, maybe 40 years old but looking 60, with hollow eyes and worn hands. "Mrs. Chen," Amara said gently. "This is the man I told you about." The woman's eyes widened when she saw Lucien. Fear flashed across her face, then something harder. Anger, maybe. Or despair so deep it looked like rage. "You," she whispered. Lucien felt uncomfortable for the first time in years. He didn't know this woman. He'd never seen her before in his life. 3 years ago, "You bought the building where my husband worked," Mrs. Chen said, her voice shaking. "You needed it for something, I don't know what. Money business. The owners wouldn't sell, so you made them sell. You scared them, threatened them. My husband, he was the building manager. He tried to help the owners fight back. He knew things." She stopped, swallowing hard. 2 weeks later, he disappeared. The police said he left town, but his wallet was still here. His clothes. Everything. He wouldn't just leave, not without his family, not without saying goodbye to our daughter. Lucian's mind raced through deals, through acquisitions, through the hundreds of business transactions his organization had handled. He didn't remember this building, didn't remember this man. His people had taken care of it. That's what they did. They took care of problems. I don't, he started. "You don't remember," Mrs. Chen finished for him. "Of course you don't. We were invisible to you. Just obstacles, just problems to solve. She looked at Amara. I work 3 jobs now. My daughter asks about her father every night. I tell her he's coming home. But I know he's not. I know what happens to people who get in your way. Amara touched Lucian's arm. There are 12 more families like this in this neighborhood alone. 12 families who lost everything because your organization needed this area for operations. Should we visit them too? Lucian stood frozen in that narrow hallway, Mrs. Chen's hollow eyes burning into him, and for the first time in his adult life, he couldn't look away. Varel Knox appeared at the mansion gates 2 weeks after she'd fled. Her designer sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose, her confidence restored. The federal investigation had quieted down. No arrests had been made. Lucian's lawyers had done their job, and the news cycle had moved on to the next scandal. It was safe to come back now. Safe to reclaim her place. She pressed the intercom button, expecting the usual security guard to buzz her through immediately. Instead, she heard Amara's voice. Vale Manor, how may I help you? Varel's smile faltered. It's Varel Knox. Open the gate. There was a pause. Do you have an appointment, Miss Knox? An appointment? Varel's voice rose. I don't need an appointment. Tell Lucian I'm here. Mr. Vale is occupied at the moment. If you'd like, I can take a message. Varel stared at the intercom in disbelief. The maid, the help, was screening her calls now? She pressed the button again, harder this time. Listen to me carefully. I know Lucian. We have history. Open this gate right now or... The line went dead. Within an hour, Varel had called Cressida, Lisette, and Seraphine. They met at Varel's penthouse apartment, expensive wine in hand, outrage in their voices. She's gotten too comfortable, Cressida said, pacing in her blue dress. We leave for 2 weeks and suddenly the maid thinks she runs the place? It's worse than that, Varel said. I heard from Marcus, the security guard, that Lucian's been going out with her, to poor neighborhoods. Can you imagine? She's filling his head with some kind of charity nonsense. Seraphine laughed, sharp and cruel. Charity? Lucian Vale? Please, he's probably just amusing himself. You know how he gets bored. Then why isn't he taking our calls? Lisette asked quietly. She'd tried twice. Both times Amara had answered and politely told her Mr. Vale was unavailable. The 4 women exchanged glances. An unspoken understanding passed between them. They'd built comfortable lives around Lucien's wealth and power. They couldn't let a maid, a nobody, threaten that. We need to remind him who actually belongs in his world, Varel said, and who doesn't. They arrived together the next day, a united front in matching blue gowns, their hair styled perfectly, their jewelry catching the afternoon light. This time the gate opened. They walked into the foyer like they owned it, their heels clicking on the marble. Lucian was in the sitting room. Amara stood nearby, notepad in hand, wearing her usual gray uniform. She didn't look surprised to see them. She didn't look afraid either. Lucian, darling, Varel purred, moving toward him with practiced grace. We've been so worried about you. Lucian looked up from the papers he'd been reviewing. His expression was cool, distant. Worried enough to run the moment things got difficult? Varel's smile tightened. We were protecting ourselves. Surely you understand that. But we're back now. Things can go back to normal. Normal, Lucian repeated, his eyes moving to Amara, then back to the 4 women. I'm not sure I want normal anymore. Cressida stepped forward. Lucian, you can't be serious. You're letting the help influence your decisions now? She gestured toward Amara with barely concealed disgust. She's a maid. She doesn't understand your world. No, Lucian said quietly. She understands things I've been avoiding for years. He stood, his presence filling the room. You 4 ran the moment you smelled danger. Amara stayed. She asked me to face what I've done. None of you ever asked me to be anything other than useful. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. This is ridiculous. You're choosing her over us? I'm choosing to be someone different, Lucian said, and that doesn't include people who only want me when it's convenient. The women in blue stood frozen, their plan crumbling. Amara remained silent, her calm presence somehow louder than all their protests combined. Lucian didn't tell his organization what he was planning. He didn't tell his lawyers or his accountants or the men who handled his operations. He simply withdrew $50,000 in cash, put it in a plain envelope, and drove to the address Amara had written down for him. The woman's name was Sarah Martinez. Her husband had been a witness in a federal case 3 years ago. Lucian remembered signing off on the order. It had been business. Clean. Efficient. He hadn't thought about it since, until Amara showed him the obituary, until she told him about the 2 children who grew up without a father, until she asked him, very quietly, if he ever wondered about the families left behind. Amara sat in the passenger seat now, silent but present. She hadn't asked to come. Lucienne had asked her. He wasn't sure why. Maybe he needed a witness. Maybe he needed someone to hold him accountable, or maybe he just didn't want to face this alone. They parked outside a small house with a chain-link fence and toys scattered in the yard. Lucienne's hands gripped the steering wheel. "I don't know what to say to her," he admitted. "The truth," Amara said simply. "Or as much of it as you can give." Mrs. Martinez answered the door with a dish towel in her hands, her face tired but kind. When she saw Lucian, confusion crossed her features. She didn't recognize him. Why would she? He'd been a signature on a document, nothing more. "Can I help you?" she asked. Lucian held out the envelope. His throat felt tight. I knew your husband, a long time ago. I wanted to make sure you and your children were taken care of." Mrs. Martinez stared at the envelope, then at him. Suspicion flickered in her eyes. "Who are you?" "Someone who should have done this years ago," Lucienne said. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough. She took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it, and gasped. "I can't. This is too much. I don't understand." "Please," Lucian said, "for your children, for their future." Mrs. Martinez looked at Amara, as if searching for confirmation that this was real. Amara nodded gently, the woman's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means. The bills, the debt. I thought we'd never get out from under it." When they returned to the car, Lucian sat in silence for a long time. Amara didn't push him to speak. She just waited. "I killed her husband," he finally said. "And I just gave her money like that makes it right. It doesn't, does it?" "No," Amara said honestly. "It doesn't bring him back. But it helps his children eat. It helps them stay in their home. It's not redemption, Mr. Vale, but it's a start." Lucian looked at her. Really looked at her. Why are you doing this? Helping me? You could have left like the others. You could have taken a severance and disappeared." Amara was quiet for a moment. "When I was 16, my mother got sick. We had no money for doctors, no insurance, nothing. A stranger paid for her treatment. I never knew who. I never got to say thank you, but that stranger gave me 5 more years with my mother. 5 years I wouldn't have had." She met his eyes. "I survived because someone chose to help when they didn't have to. Maybe I'm trying to pay that forward, even if it's to someone who doesn't deserve it." "I don't deserve it," Lucian said quietly. "I know," Amara replied, "but maybe that's exactly why you need it." For the first time since they'd met, Lucian smiled. It was small, broken, but real. Marcus Chen noticed it first. Lucian's second-in-command had built his career on reading people, on spotting weakness before it became a problem, and Lucian Vale was showing weakness. The boss was distracted. He'd turned down 3 profitable deals in 2 weeks. He'd questioned operations that had run smoothly for years. Worst of all, he'd been seen in neighborhoods where men like them didn't go, not unless they were collecting debts or sending messages, and always the maid was with him. Marcus called a meeting with the inner circle. 5 men who'd helped build Lucian's empire sat around a table in a private club, drinks untouched, faces serious. "He's compromised," Marcus said bluntly. "That woman has gotten into his head." "She's nobody," Victor, the organization's lawyer, replied. "A maid. What influence could she possibly have?" Enough to make him soft, Marcus said. Enough to make him question everything we've built. That makes her dangerous. So we remove her, said James, head of security. His tone was casual, like he was discussing taking out the trash. Marcus nodded slowly. Carefully, we can't make it obvious. Lucian can't know it was us. The next morning, Amara found a note slipped under her apartment door. No signature, just 7 words in block letters, "Leave now or you'll disappear too." She stared at it for a long time, her hands steady even as her heart raced. She'd known this was coming. She wasn't naive. Men like Lucian's associates didn't accept change. They eliminated it. She went to work anyway. 2 days later, a car followed her home from the market. It didn't try to hide. Then that was the point. They wanted her to know they were watching. The day after that, her landlord suddenly told her the building was being sold and she had 2 weeks to move out. When she asked where she could find affordable housing nearby, he looked away. "Maybe you should leave the city," he suggested. "Fresh start somewhere else." Amara knew that wasn't a suggestion. When Lucian noticed the bruise on her wrist, she'd been grabbed leaving work by a man who told her to think about her choices. His expression darkened in a way she'd never seen before. "Who did this?" His voice was ice and fire combined. "It doesn't matter," Amara said. "It matters to me." Lucian took her hand gently, examining the purple marks. "Tell me who." "Your people," Amara said quietly. "They want me gone. They think I'm making you weak." Lucian's jaw tightened. They touched you." "They're protecting their business," Amara said. "I understand that. Maybe I should—" "No." The word came out sharp, absolute. "You're not leaving. You're not running because they're trying to scare you." "Mr. Vale—" "Lucien," he interrupted. "My name is Lucien, and you're under my protection now. Anyone who touches you touches me." Amara looked up at him, saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not possession, not control. Something that looked almost like fear, but not for himself. "This will make things worse for you," she said. "Your organization won't accept this. They'll see it as choosing me over them." "Then that's exactly what I'm doing," Lucian said. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Marcus, my office. Now. We need to talk about boundaries." After he hung up, Amara touched his arm. "You're putting everything at risk for me." "Why?" Lucian was quiet for a moment. "Because for the first time in 20 years, someone is asking me to be better instead of more powerful. And I'm not willing to lose that. I'm not willing to lose you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge yet. The Riverside project was supposed to be simple. 12 families living in rent-controlled apartments that sat on valuable waterfront property. Lucian's organization had already greased the right palms, already set the legal machinery in motion. In 6 weeks, those families would be evicted and the buildings demolished. In 6 months, luxury condos would rise in their place. Profit margins would be substantial. Marcus brought the final contracts to Lucian's office, confident and efficient as always. "Just need your signature, boss. Everything's arranged." Lucien stared at the papers. He'd signed documents like this 100 times before. His pen was already in his hand. But then he saw the list of residents. 12 families, 43 people total. Names, ages, occupations. They weren't just obstacles anymore. They were Mrs. Chen's hollow eyes. They were Sarah Martinez's children. They were real. "Cancel it," Lucian said. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Cancel the project. Find another location." "Lucian, we've invested 6 months into this. We've already paid people off. The permits are approved. We can't just—" "I said cancel it." Lucian's voice was firm. "Offer the families fair market buyouts, generous ones. Give them time to relocate properly. Help them find new housing." Marcus stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "This is about her, isn't it? The maid. She's got you thinking you're some kind of saint now?" "This is about doing business without destroying people's lives," Lucian said. We can make money without making families homeless. Since when do you care about families? Marcus's voice rose. Since when do we worry about being fair? That's not how this works, Lucian. That's not who we are. Maybe it's time we became something different. Marcus slammed his hand on the desk. You're losing it. The others are already talking. They're saying you've gone soft. They're questioning whether you can still lead this organization. Then let them question, Lucian said quietly. Marcus left without another word, the contracts unsigned. Within days, the whispers became open challenges. Victor pulled funding from 2 of Lucian's legitimate businesses. James reassigned security details without asking permission. The inner circle was fracturing, and everyone knew why. Amara found Lucian in his office late one night, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at financial reports that showed the damage his decisions were causing. You're losing millions, she said softly. I know. Your people are turning against you. I know that too. Amara sat down across from him. I should leave. This is because of me. If I go, things can go back to… No. Lucian looked up, his eyes intense. Don't finish that sentence. Lucian, look at what this is costing you. Your empire, your authority, everything you've built was built on hurting people, he interrupted. On being exactly what you said I was, powerful, but not good. And I was fine with that until you showed me what it actually looked like, until you asked me if I ever thought about the families left behind. He set down his glass. You're the only person who's ever asked me to be better instead of just more powerful. Do you understand what that means to me? I understand it's destroying everything you have, Amara said. Everything I had was built on blood and fear, Lucian replied. Maybe it deserves to be destroyed. And what will you have left? Lucian reached across the desk and took her hand. A chance to build something that doesn't require people to suffer. A chance to look at myself in the mirror without seeing a monster. A chance to deserve someone like you. Amara's breath caught. I'm just a maid. You're the bravest person I've ever met, Lucian said. And I'm not letting you go. Not for money, not for power, not for anything. Marcus made his move on a Thursday evening. Clean, calculated, ruthless, exactly the way Lucian had taught him. Amara was leaving the mansion after finishing her shift when 2 men stepped out of a black SUV. She recognized them, James's security team. Before she could react, they had her arms pinned, a hand over her mouth. The world blurred as they forced her into the vehicle. The SUV drove for 20 minutes before stopping at an abandoned warehouse on the industrial edge of the city. They dragged Amara inside and pushed her into a metal chair. James stood nearby, arms crossed. Marcus emerged from the shadows, his expression cold and businesslike. Well, nothing personal, Marcus said to Amara, but you've become a problem we need to solve. Amara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. Lucien will come for me. We're counting on it, Marcus replied. An hour later, Lucien's phone rang. Marcus's voice was calm on the other end. We have the Maid, warehouse on Porter Street. Come alone, or she dies. Lucien's blood ran cold. If you hurt her, you'll what? You've already shown us you won't do what needs to be done anymore. Marcus paused. That's why we're giving you a choice. Come back to us. Be the leader we need. Make the hard decisions again. Or lose her. Your empire or the Maid. Choose. When Lucian arrived at the warehouse, he found not just Marcus and James, but 8 other high-ranking members of his organization. They stood in a semicircle, a show of unified force. And to his disgust, Virel, Cressida, Lisette, and Seraphine stood off to the side, dressed in their blue gowns like they were attending a business meeting. Really? Lucian asked, looking at the 4 women. You're part of this? Virel stepped forward, her chin high. We're protecting our interests. Marcus promised us that once you come to your senses and get rid of her, things will go back to normal. We'll have our place back. Your place, Lucian repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. Amara sat bound to the chair in the center of the warehouse, her face bruised but her eyes fierce. When she saw Lucienne, relief and fear crossed her features in equal measure. "Don't do what they want," she called out. "Don't go back to being that person." Marcus walked to stand behind Amara's chair, pulling out a gun and pressing it to her temple. "Here's how this works, Lucian. You sign these documents." He gestured to papers on a nearby table, reinstating full operational authority to the council. "You approve the Riverside project and every other deal you've blocked. You send the maid away and never see her again. You go back to being the boss we need." "And if I refuse?" Lucian asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then she dies," Marcus said simply. "And you'll have lost everything for nothing. Your empire will fracture without you. The woman will be dead. You'll have neither power nor redemption." James spoke up. "You taught us that sentiment is weakness, Lucian. That people are either assets or obstacles. She's an obstacle. Treat her like one." Lucian looked at Amara. She shook her head slowly, tears streaming down her face but her voice strong. "Don't. Please don't become that man again. Not for me." Marcus cocked the gun. 10 seconds, Lucian. What's it going to be? Your empire or her life?" The warehouse fell silent, except for Lucian's breathing. Every person there watched him, waiting to see who he truly was, the ruthless crime boss or the man Amara believed he could become. 5 seconds, Marcus counted. Lucian closed his eyes. Lucian opened his eyes and looked directly at Marcus. "Put the gun down." "Sign the papers first," Marcus replied, pressing the barrel harder against Amara's temple. "I said, put it down." Lucian's voice carried a new kind of authority, not the threatening power he'd wielded for years, but something deeper, something certain. "Because I'm not signing anything. And I'm not going back." Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you've chosen her death." "No," Lucian said calmly. "I've chosen to stop being a coward." He pulled out his phone. Marcus tensed. "What are you doing?" "Calling the FBI," Lucian said. "I've been in contact with Agent Sarah Morrison for 3 days now. She's very interested in the organization's operations, especially the details I've been providing about money laundering, witness intimidation, and murder." The warehouse erupted. James lunged forward, but Lucian held up his hand. "They're already outside. I told them where I'd be. If I don't walk out of here with Amara in 5 minutes, they're coming in." "You're bluffing," Marcus said, but his voice wavered. "Try me," Lucian replied. "Pull that trigger and see what happens. You'll get murder charges added to everything else. Or you can put the gun down and maybe you can make a deal before this all comes down on your heads." Victor stepped forward, his lawyer instincts kicking in. "He's serious. Look at him. He's already made his choice." "He's betraying us," James shouted. "For a maid. For some nobody who doesn't matter." "She matters more than any of this," Lucian said quietly. "More than the money, more than the power, more than the empire. She's the only person who saw me and asked me to be human again, and I'm not going to let her die for showing me the truth." Varel's face went pale. "You're throwing everything away. For her?" "I'm throwing away a life built on hurting people," Lucian corrected. "That's not the same thing." Marcus's hand shook. The gun trembled against Amara's head. For a long moment, no one moved. Then sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. "You've destroyed us," Marcus said bitterly. "No," Lucian replied. "I've destroyed what we became. There's a difference." Marcus lowered the gun. James swore viciously. The women in blue backed toward the exit, already calculating their escape routes. But it was too late. The warehouse doors burst open. Federal agents flooded in, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. In the chaos, Lucian moved straight to Amara. He untied her hands, helped her stand, wrapped his arms around her as she trembled. "I've got you," he whispered. "You're safe now." "You gave it all up," Amara said, her voice breaking. "Everything you built." "I gave up everything I was ashamed of," Lucian corrected. "What I'm building now, with you, that's worth keeping." Agent Morrison approached, handcuffs ready. "Mr. Vale, we had a deal, full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges and witness protection for those you've helped." "I remember," Lucian said. "I'm ready." as agents began making arrests, as his former associates were read their rights, as the empire he'd built for 20 years crumbled around him, Lucian held Amara's hand and felt something he hadn't felt in decades: peace. Marcus was dragged past them in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage and betrayal. "You chose wrong, Lucian. You chose wrong." Lucian looked at Amara, bruised but brave, afraid but standing tall, and shook his head. "No," he said softly. "For the first time in my life, I chose right." 6 months later, Amara Vane stood at the front of a conference room in downtown offices that still smelled of fresh paint. 20 community leaders sat before her, listening intently as she explained the Vale Foundation's newest initiative, affordable housing developments in neighborhoods that Lucian's organization had once destroyed. She wore a tailored navy suit now, not a maid's uniform. Her hair was still pulled back neatly, but confidence had replaced the careful invisibility she'd once carried. When she spoke, people leaned forward. When she made decisions, they were respected. "We can't undo the past," Amara said, her voice clear and steady. "But we can build a different future. That's what this foundation is for, repairing what was broken, investing in communities instead of exploiting them." Lucian sat in the back row, taking notes. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt, nothing like the expensive suits he'd once favored. His role at the foundation was officially listed as community liaison, which was a polite way of saying he did whatever Amara needed. He met with families his organization had harmed. He testified in court cases. He worked construction on the housing projects when they needed extra hands. His plea deal had kept him out of prison, but barely. 5 years probation, community service, restitution payments that would take decades to complete. His assets had been frozen, his properties seized. The mansion was gone, sold to pay legal fees and victim compensation. He lived in a modest apartment now. He took the bus to work. He was nobody, exactly what he deserved to be. But when Amara looked at him across the conference room and smiled, he felt richer than he'd ever felt in the mansion. After the meeting ended, as community leaders filed out discussing plans and timelines, 3 women in blue dresses appeared in the doorway. Virel, Cressida, and Lisette, Seraphine had moved to Europe, smart enough to stay away. "Amara?" Virel said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We heard about the foundation. How wonderful that you found such a nice position. We were hoping to get involved. Perhaps on the board? We have connections that could be useful." Amara studied them calmly. She remembered how they'd stood in that warehouse, siding with the coup, ready to watch her die if it meant protecting their access to wealth. "The foundation isn't looking for board members right now," Amara said politely. "But we're always looking for volunteers. We're building a community center in East Side next month. We need people willing to do physical labor, painting, cleaning, moving furniture. If you're interested in actually helping, I can sign you up." Virel's smile froze. "Physical labor? I don't think you understand. We were thinking more of a leadership role. Advisory positions." "I understand perfectly," Amara replied. "But this foundation isn't about status or connections. It's about doing the actual work of repairing communities. If that doesn't interest you, then neither does this conversation." Cressida stepped forward, her tone sharp. "You're really going to stand there and lecture us? You were a maid 6 months ago. You cleaned toilets and served drinks. Don't forget where you came from." "I haven't forgotten," Amara said quietly. "I came from a place where I understood what it meant to struggle, to be invisible, or to be dismissed by people who thought they were better than me. That's exactly why I'm qualified to run this foundation, because I remember what it feels like to be the people we're trying to help." She moved toward the door, clearly ending the conversation. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to do." The 3 women left, their heels clicking angrily on the polished floors. Lucian approached once they were gone. "You handled that well." "They didn't come here to help," Amara said. "They came hoping you still had money they could access." "What I have now is better than money," Lucian said, taking her hand. "I have a purpose. I have a chance to make things right. And I have you." Amara squeezed his hand. We're building something good here, something real. We are, Lucian agreed. He looked around the office, modest, purposeful, filled with plans to help rather than hurt. It's not an empire. No, Amara said, smiling. It's better than an empire. It's a life worth living. Through the window, the city stretched out before them, scarred but healing, broken but rebuilding. Just like them.